Picture a table for one. Now picture a waiter looking at that table like it's broken something. In some countries, that's exactly what happens. You walk in alone. You ask for one seat, and the room responds like you've made a mistake. But the real answer is far stranger than rudeness. It has nothing to do with manners. It has everything to do with what your species spent 200,000 years believing a meal actually was. You think of food as fuel, calories, nutrients, something your body needs to keep running. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. For most of human history, a meal was never just fuel. A meal was a test. A meal was proof. Proof that you belonged to a group willing to share what it had with you. Think about that for a second. Why would that matter so much? Because for almost all of human history, eating was the most dangerous moment of the day. Not because of the food itself, because of who was around you while you ate it. A solitary human, eyes down, hands full, was the easiest target on the savannah. A group sharing a kill was something else entirely. It was a fortress. It was 20 pairs of eyes instead of 2. Your ancestors who ate together lived longer than the ones who didn't. That single fact got carved into the architecture of your brain, and it never left. This is where the story gets specific. In 2017, a researcher named Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford ran a study most people have never heard of. He surveyed thousands of people in the UK about how often they shared meals with others, and then measured something separate. How connected those people felt to their community, how satisfied they were with life, how much they trusted the people around them. The results weren't subtle. The more often someone ate with other people, the higher their reported well-being. And here's the detail that made Dunbar's team sit up straighter. When they tracked the data over time, the direction of cause and effect ran one way. Eating together didn't just happen to people who were already close. Eating together is what made them close. The meal came first. The bond followed. Your body doesn't know the difference between dinner in 2026 and dinner 40,000 years ago. Same chemistry, same circuitry, same ancient calculation running quietly underneath. So now go to Seoul. For most of the 20th century in South Korea, walking into a restaurant alone and asking for a table for one wasn't just unusual. It was read as a quiet kind of failure. There's a word for the social fear behind it. Wangda, the dread of being seen as cut off from the group, an outcast. In a culture built on a tight, vertical web of relationships, showing up to eat without anyone beside you didn't look like independence. It looked like evidence. Evidence that no one wanted to sit with you. Restaurants built their entire menus around this assumption. Stews, Korean barbecue, hot pot, almost everything came in servings designed for 2 people minimum, because the architecture of the meal itself assumed you'd never be ordering for one. But notice what's happening underneath that discomfort. It's not really about food portions, it's about visibility. An empty chair across from you isn't just empty space. It's a signal, broadcast to an entire restaurant, about your place in the social order. Now here's the twist nobody saw coming. Starting around 2015, something flipped. A new word entered the language. Honbap, a fusion of honja, meaning alone, and bap, meaning rice, meaning meal. Single-person households in South Korea had been climbing for years, and by the early 2020s they made up roughly a third of all households in Seoul, with projections pushing toward half by 2030. The infrastructure of solitude had quietly become the new normal, while the old social rules hadn't caught up yet. Then they did. Restaurants started building single-seat counters. Convenience stores carved out solo dining zones. Korean dramas started showing characters eating alone, not as a sad detail, but as a flex, a small act of self-possession. A pop idol posted a video of herself confidently eating alone on camera, and it went viral for exactly that reason. Within a few years, the same act that once read as social failure had been rebranded as something closer to liberation. What changed wasn't the biology. Your nervous system still treats a shared meal as a signal of safety, whether you're aware of it or not. What changed was the meaning layered on top of it. Culture took the same ancient circuitry and pointed it in the opposite direction. This is the part most people miss about culture in general. You assume it's about beliefs, opinions people hold. But culture is really a set of inherited answers to a much older question. Who is safe to be near, and how do you prove it? Different societies answer that question with different tools. Sometimes the tool is a shared table. Sometimes it's a shared bow. Sometimes it's a shared silence. The tool changes. The underlying question, the one your ancestors couldn't afford to get wrong, stays exactly the same. Compare that to where you might be sitting right now. In a lot of Western cities, eating alone barely registers as a social event at all. Solo dining has become its own quiet trend, with restaurants in places like Helsinki and New York actively courting the single diner, treating the act not as deprivation, but as a kind of self-curated indulgence. Researchers studying this shift have noticed something almost paradoxical. Eating alone in public, by choice, in a culture that has stopped reading it as failure, can feel less like loneliness and more like freedom. Same behavior, same table. Completely different meaning because the surrounding culture decided to read it differently. Here's where it gets even stranger. The sociologist Eric Klinenberg has pointed out something that should stop you for a second. Your species has roughly 200,000 years of experience living, eating, and surviving in tight groups. You have maybe 50 or 60 years of mass experience living and eating alone by choice. Solo living isn't ancient. It's barely a blip, which means every time you eat by yourself without a flicker of anxiety, you're running an experiment your ancestors never got to run. You're testing whether the old fear still applies when the old danger is gone. For most of you, it doesn't apply anymore. There are no predators waiting outside the door of a noodle shop. But the feeling can still show up anyway, faint and unexplained, because feelings are slower to update than circumstances. You might sit down alone and feel a small flush of self-consciousness with no obvious source. That flush isn't irrational. It's just outdated. It's a 40,000-year-old alarm going off in a building it was never designed for. And this is why the question of whether you can eat alone in a country is never really a question about restaurants. It's a live readout of how that culture has chosen to manage an ancient piece of survival math. Some cultures still run the old program almost unedited. A meal is a declaration of belonging, and eating without anyone beside you reads as a confession. Other cultures have rewritten the program entirely, turning solitude at the table into a badge of autonomy instead of a mark of exclusion. Neither version is more human than the other. They're both descendants of the exact same ancestral fear, just raised in different households. There's a quieter detail in the Korean research that's easy to miss. Some studies tracking solo diners found they tend to pay less attention to nutrition or tradition and more to comfort and speed, often defaulting to something fast and familiar, like a simple fried egg over rice. When the social performance of the meal disappears, people don't necessarily eat worse. They just stop performing. The meal stops being a stage and goes back to being food, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. How much of what you think of as your relationship with food, the rituals, the pacing, the plating, has actually been a relationship with an audience the whole time? So think about the last time you ate in front of other people. Did you eat differently than you would have alone? Slower maybe, more carefully, a little more aware of how you look doing it. That's not vanity. That's 40,000 years of social calculus running so quietly you never noticed the calculation happening at all. And think about the last time you ate by yourself, completely unobserved. Did some small part of you relax in a way you couldn't quite name? That relaxation has a history too. It's the sound of an ancient alarm finally, briefly, agreeing to go quiet. Tonight, when you sit down to eat, alone or with someone else, you won't be just having dinner. You'll be casting a vote in a debate your ancestors started before written language existed. A debate about who gets to be near you while you're at your most exposed. The table has changed. The plates have changed. The debate never did. And somewhere, in a restaurant in Seoul or a noodle counter in Helsinki, someone is sitting down alone right now, completely unaware that the empty chair across from them is the same empty chair your ancestors spent 200,000 years learning to fear.